and the world's favorite stars. Here are scientific puzzles that symbolize the international spirit of space-age horror.
All right, let's go. Let's go. What's up, y'all? What's going on tonight? We got a special treat. We have our friend Hesher here. Hesher is the founder of Alternate Current Radio, Boiler Room. He's on TNT Global Radio Live, State of the Nation every day. He's big time. Anybody who is in our circle knows Hesher, has been listening to him for years. They just recently celebrated the 9th anniversary of Alternate Current Radio. This guy had a major influence on me. We've all been listening to him for years, and I'm really, really excited to introduce Hesher tonight because we got a big time movie analysis. We're doing the movie Hesher, and we've got the expert Hesher here to talk about it. Hesher, how you doing tonight?
Good, man. Good. I'm sporting my American flag fist here, my American flag metal horns here. It's great to be on the show with you tonight. Never actually done any analysis on this movie in public, I don't think. I mean, I've mentioned it a few times, but yeah, I'm really excited to do that here on the show with you tonight.
I'm excited for this too. You know, I saw this movie's been around for a while. It came out in 2010, 2011. And one day I was listening, I was sitting there listening to Metallica, and I just thought of the movie, and I thought, who better to help me analyze this movie than the namesake, right? And so, and what's interesting is we have a lot of metal fans in this sort of area. Most notably, our friend Mixky out there, Technoir Graphics. So shouts out to him. So this is going to be a good one, y'all. We're going to deep dive into this movie, and we're going to also talk to Hesher about metal, about music, and all kinds of stuff. So where do you want to start, man?
Well, let's see. Let me perhaps kick off with just a little bit about myself, if you don't
Yes,
mind.
yes, please tell the people.
So I grew up in various places in California, but probably the most formative place and time, well, one of the most formative places and times, the time when I would have been the ages of probably the characters of both TJ and Hesher in the movie. This place called Grass Valley, California, and it's in the Sierra Nevada foothills, kind of like in between Sacramento and Lake Tahoe. And it's pretty, so we're talking late 80s, early 90s, pretty sleepy town, kind of like South Park esque in some ways, but California version of it. And it was an interesting place to grow up. There was not a lot to do, so basically it was for us young people, it was sports, it was skateboards, it was snowboards, and music. We had a lot of a fair amount of young musicians in our small town. My high school class was not huge, not by any means. Maybe, and I was the school I went to had only been there for like 4 or 5 years by the time I was a senior. So and it was sort of, the communities there were sort of built in the probably in the 70s, 60s, and 70s mostly. So it was sort of like mountain suburban, rural suburban, maybe, like very rural, and then pockets of like housing units. But the housing units they're not like the ones they build now where there's 200 feet between them. Everybody's got an acre, or 3/4 of an acre, half acre, that kind of lot. And it's hills, foothills just below where all the snow is. So it was a great place to grow up. We all, of course, all wanted to be in San Francisco where everything seemed cool, and this is like the heyday of MTV and all that stuff, and Headbangers Ball comes out. So I'm growing up in this area basically. My parents picked that area, well, because they're pretty cool. They picked a cool area, but we had lived in on the beach a long time, or, before that when I was much younger, Humboldt County, Santa Barbara County, and then sort of settled up there in this place. Now, it turns out that I gravitated kind of to all of those things. I liked sports at first, and then I liked skateboarding first, and then I tried sports out. I never really stopped the skateboarding though. I kept doing that, and then through the sports part of my youth, I ended up meeting some guys from the class above me. And I had grown up I liked anything that was popular. And I grew up when MTV was not even a thing. I remember sitting down and watching this thing called Friday Night Videos with my family, like on UHF or something like that, on rabbit ears for you young people. We used to get television out of the sky instead of through cables, if you could imagine that. Same with our phones. They had cables instead of through the sky. And they didn't give you radiation illnesses and that kind of stuff that our current
Right.
devices do. So yay for progress. But anyways, so I was there when Beat It came out. I was there when Thriller came out. I was there when 1984 and Van Halen Jump came out. I was like, any of that shit, I like all that Quiet Riot. I always gravitated to the heavier sounding things though, and my dad had this awesome record collection. He had, he had Jethro Tull, he had Black Sabbath, he had Pink Floyd. My mom had some, choice cuts of her own in there too. So like I grew up in a family that had a cool vinyl collection, and that was kind of there, in the roller rink era, So music was sort of the thing that always had my attention, and skateboarding. Did sports for a little bit, and then kind of like met some of my buddies in high school, and most of my buddies were like a year ahead of me. Like shouts out to Matt Mann, who you can hear on Alternate Current Radio sometime. Danny Fletcher, Dustin Morgan. So that we built like a very small crew of people that were budding Heshers, budding metalheads, right? And like I meet my friend Matt on a bus, or because I was trying to date his little sister or something, I don't remember. And like, he's got King Diamond shirts on, Metallica shirts and stuff like this, and I'm just like this nerdy sixth grader, on the same bus as him, and he's getting on, and I'm rocking Twisted Sister in my Walkman or something like that, and then Matt walks on. He's, his parents are cool. They let him grow his hair long. He's got long hair and a Metallica Kill 'Em All shirt, and it was just like, whoa, oh man, I wonder what that band must be gnarly, like, and I was like afraid to talk to him until I actually went to his house one time, and like he's in his room, jamming out, playing like Dawkins or something like that. Shout out to Dawkins Storm if he's out there.
Shout out to our friend Dawkins.
Yeah, Dawkins joined me on State of the Nation recently. We had a great chat. Anyways, Madman would rock that stuff, and like, and I still like we listened to I listened to the show called Metal Shop, right? I would get it on the FM feed like on midnights. I think at midnights on Saturdays. It was like once a week show, and I just happened to find it one night. I think I was in 6th grade, and the first time I find the station, the first song they play, literally, dude, was I didn't miss any of it. I didn't tune in the middle of it. It was like I find the station and it's got this killer like bumper music, Metal Shop, and all those buzzsaw sounds and shit. I was hoping to look that up so I could give you some technical history on the Metal Shop radio show, but I just didn't have time because I was on Timothy Shea's show before this. But anyways, they play Leper Messiah. You know the track. Bow to Leper Messiah. It's one of my favorites still to this day, quite possibly my favorite Metallica track. And I was immediately just transmogrified from like your Twisted Sister, Quiet Riot, sort of music fan to, wow, this sounds dangerous. This has something like I've never heard, and I'm primed for it because I've listened to Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, all this other stuff, Doors, love all that crap. And then just sort of like, through the popularity of music as it evolved, and you get your hair metal phase, and then boom, I finally hit my earbuds, finally hear Metallica, and it snaps. And all of a sudden, like next time I see these guys, and I'm like, keep in mind at this point, I'm in like junior high. Those guys graduate, go on to high school, and they're like a year ahead of me. So 7th grade year, like those guys, I still like, I just sort of know them and stuff. And then it's like when I'm in 8th grade, those guys are all in high school now, and I'm kind of all alone. I'm like the only kid at school, basically at my middle school that listened to heavy music. So I'm, trying to get other kids into it, and all my friends are just like, whatever, I want to listen to pop music, I guess. I want to listen to, dance music stuff. And I'm like just discovering Exodus, I'm discovering Death Angel, and I'm discovering Headbangers Ball. And, I'm just completely like, wow, this is just amazing, as a little kid, and then I get into high school, and I'm like, you're in that age where it's like, what am I going to do? What do I want to be? I'm still riding skateboards and this kind of stuff. And, but I've grown a lot too. And I've got people telling me I should play football. That's what my dad did when he was in high school. So I figure, I look up to him. Maybe I should try that out, so I play football for 2 years, and I have, I get into that. I have fun with that. I'm good at that. But in my off season, I want to hang with my rocker friends and my skateboarder friends. And I indulge in that, I totally indulged in that. And we were crass, and we were fun, and we were funny, and we would do stupid and crazy shit because we were just, middle class kids that had, a pretty decent rural suburban life, somewhat isolated in the hills, and not a whole lot happened around there. You could ride your mountain bikes around and just be like feral children for up to, 8-10 hours of the day, or whatever your parents would let you do. And skateboards and mountain bikes and, mountains. And, as you get older in your teenage years and people start smoking weed and all this kind of stuff, it just all makes sense. It clicks in. And by junior year, I didn't want to play sports anymore. I want to hang out with my friends because I'm reunited with my buddies that are a year above me, and they all have their driver's licenses now. So we're off and running, man. At this point, it's just like, fuck, we're sneaking off to Oakland and San Francisco all the time, some of us telling our parents, some of us not. Sorry, mom. But we're down there seeing Bolt Thrower, we're down there seeing Carcass, we're down there seeing Forbidden, Exodus, and just like these whole scenes. And this is when these scenes are like just beginning. And then Florida death metal became a thing, and we got to be there at the shift. We were, and then we got to get crapped on when grunge music became the norm.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden metal kind of disappeared, and then we were like forced back underground after this like titanic rise of a scene, like it was, we're it's a trip, man, to think back on it. But I think back, I say all this just because where I grew up, Cliff Burton lived in the same area. He lived in the same mountain area, rural suburb as I did. He was obviously a few years older than me. A lot of those guys are the critical 5 to 12 years older than me that made it, so that I was the little kid kind of right behind them as they had their rise. But we had a pretty cool little like metal group in up there in Grass Valley, and there was maybe 5, 6, 7 of us at first, and it kind of grew as the years went by. And then we ended up meeting up with a similar crew of rocker dudes in Auburn, California, which was one town over. And we had this like convergence of 2 mountain towns all of a sudden, where like all the guys in bands knew each other and all this stuff, so like it was this really fun sort of youth and all of us had, various sort of like backgrounds and families and issues going on. And some people's parents were super strict, and some people's parents were just checked out, and kids could party there and stuff like that. It was a really interesting thing. And this is while heavy music is evolving from rock and roll and punk and that into thrash metal, and then into death metal, and then the black metal era came about, and then they all kind of swirled together, and we get all the subgenres start falling out. It's just dripping with pussy subgenres now at this point. It's festered long enough that we can, my music library has to be multiple terabytes to hold it all. But I find it interesting that Cliff Burton is such a iconic personality, and that his family lived right down the road from mine, even though he was a generation ahead of me. And there were characters like him that lived on my street. There was a dude, shout out to this dude if he's still out there. I don't know his name other than Thor. His name was Thor. And Thor lived at the top of my street, and Thor would rock a shot coat, a shot leather coat, 24/7, long freaking hair. He looked like a young Warrell Dane kind of, without the poofy part up front. And he was like 6'3", 6'4", big dude. And he would always be riding like a Vision skateboard. I don't remember what brand, but I want to say Vision or Pal Peralta or something like that. And he was always doing hand plants up at the top of the street. I thought that dude was so cool. I was like 4 years younger than him or something. And I was just like, oh my God, Thor is like the coolest dude. And of course I looked up to my buddies and eventually became, very good friends with them. And we hung for, years and years. I still hang with some of those guys. Shouts out to all those dudes. And, we just went from there. We all kind of went our own ways as we grew up. And, I moved off to Humboldt County. Some of those guys moved off to San Francisco, some of them LA, some of them stayed back home, and we would always meet up at, shows and whatnot. But anyways, Cliff Burton, his sister, we would find his sister at the Sizzler there sometimes. We found her there once with Jim Martin from Faith No More. So there would be like these weird occurrences in our town that were, related to them. His mom and dad lived there for a long time and whatnot. But anyway, let's get to the movie, dude. And the thing I'll finish on is, why is my call sign Hesher? Did I do that because of the movie? No. Someone called me that years before this movie came out, 20 years before this movie came out, 15, 20 years before this movie came out. And it just became something that stuck in the lexicon of metalheads. And it's in reference to Hessian warriors and how unkempt and barbaric they look, or the way they party, whatnot, the way they do battle, the way they do war. So that's where that came from. I got called that by someone in Humboldt County, where there were basically no other Heshers, because everybody was wearing patchwork Grateful Dead shit up there.
Right. I figured that, that you had your name before the movie came out. I mean, the movie came out in like 2010, 2011, but you were already doing radio stuff and internet stuff before that, or at least at that point, weren't you?
It was almost at the exact same time. I
Yeah.
entered a chat room with that as I have to come up with a chat room name, and it's just the first one that I used because I got called that at Humboldt State by some of my friends. I didn't like the nickname the hippies gave me up there with Satan. I never liked that. I let them roll with it because whatever. I was young and it was shocking to people, but I always appreciated my friend Eli, who was the first person to ever call me Hesher. He yelled at me from across like 3 blocks, "Hey, Hesher, dude!" And I was like, what the hell? He's wearing a Napalm Death shirt, and I'm like, all right, we're gonna be friends,
right? And you've got the Hessian Session on ACR, right? And in Boiler Room, so yeah. So
that's my longest running show, actually, is Hessian Session, and no one really shows up for it because nobody can handle 6 hours of just blast beats and growls and grunts and stuff. But I still do it on Saturday nights.
Man, you bring up so much in there. I mean, I think one of the most interesting things is like how you broke it down to the 5 to 12-year-old, 5 to 12-year age gap. And I think that, you talking about these various like Hesher figures, not just from the film, but, in real life. And I think that probably at least the dudes in the audience, we've all known people like that. I mean, I knew a guy, I'm younger, so I just at that, like I was 11 when grunge broke, right? And the first time that I heard Metallica was when I saw the Nothing Else Matters video on MTV. So, I was like 11 years old. And I instantly, I mean, it's funny because I was like Jason Newsted era Metallica. And I'm not like, I wasn't like a metalhead or like super into Metallica, but that song in particular meant a lot to me because it just, there was something about it that was different than all the grunge music that was happening. And obviously grunge owed a lot to metal. I mean, the heaviness of it obviously evolved out of metal and then took this completely different turn, sort of mixed with punk or, and all that stuff. But I remember that the morning that my grandmother died when I was 12 years old, I called into the radio station because I had to stay home that day, and I called in the radio station because they asked for requests in the morning, and I called in, and I was like, yeah, this just happened. Can you play Nothing Else Matters? And the guy was like, man, that's really deep, dude. Little dude, but we can't play Metallica at 8 a.m. in the morning. And I was like, oh fuck,
even that song, come on,
yeah, even that song. But it's I think that is. It's interesting to me that I have that memory, and that you've talked about what metal meant to you in your youth. When we have this movie where we have this character who is so interesting and sort of embodies this. He embodies the Hesher character, right? This guy who's like, I mean, I knew in high school, I was in a band, but I knew this guy. There was this one dude at high school, and I don't know his name, but we all called him Death Metal. Yeah. And he was older, and he stood out. And I think the one thing that's interesting about metal music is that at its core, there's especially when you listen to the lyrics and the heaviness of the music, there's a lot of it that's about like loneliness or about solitude. And yet metal has this inherent community that goes along with it that is unlike any other kind of music, except maybe, I don't know, maybe rave music, like where people, when you meet somebody who is into the same thing, it's an instant click. Like it's an instant thing that you relate to with another person. So I appreciate that about it. This movie is incredible because a lot of movies have tried to portray metal music or metalheads or this certain time and place, but they often don't get it. It becomes a caricature. And one thing that I liked about this movie was that we don't get any explanation for this dude. Like we don't
no
know where there's no backstory. There's no exposition. He just materializes. And And one of the interesting things is that, like, first of all, I gotta say, like, Joseph Gordon-Levitt is really good in this movie. I mean, he's
Yeah.
like, you wouldn't expect this dude to play this character so well because he came from TV and is these like clean cut characters in other movies, but but he really embodies this character in a way where you totally believe this guy. You forget it's the actor playing him,
Yeah.
and he's so good. And the crazy thing is like that all the like vulnerability that you see in his character is all sort of projected onto him. You realize when you're watching it, if you're like me, that the things that you want to see in him are just what you want to see. It's not what he's actually, but he's just all of his stories, all of his the sort of allegories that he goes into when he tells stories, which is very, very rarely, like he's telling them straight. He's not meant to be any other kind. There's no figurative meaning in the story that he's telling, especially at the end of the film. And it's just him telling a story, and you realize that you see what you want to in this character. So, this was a like surprisingly poignant movie. I mean, it really hit me hard watching this movie. And it's like you think that you're going into a kind of a is it a dark comedy? Is it a caricature of like a time and place? Oh, the other thing is that I find it so interesting that like we're from different sides of the country. I'm from Virginia, and you're from California. And for me, growing up, all of this type of music comes from California. It all comes from the West Coast.
Hey,
and
you're from Guar territory, buddy. Watch out. Watch out. Be careful there.
Yes, I was about to bring that up. Yes, Dave Brocky and Guar. Guar's. It's interesting that Guar and then later Lamb of God are both from Richmond, Virginia. And Guar got their start. They played weekly shows in Richmond at the Flood Zone, and Dave Brocky, R.I.P. He overdosed. Like I don't know, about around 2013, but and he's actually buried in Hollywood Cemetery with all of which is the cemetery overlooking the river, like with 3 presidents and all of the war dead,
Amazing.
and he's a legendary character. And Guar, I never got to see Guar, and I tried to when I was younger, but I couldn't get it. I just couldn't. I was too young, and I couldn't get in to see him. But that you're from California, and like the concept of the valley also is important in this movie because we're going to get into that, I'm sure. But what this character sort of represents. So let me give a breakdown of the movie. Just a quick rundown of what the movie's about, real quick, I guess.
Let me make one quick comment here. When you were talking about Jason Gordon-Levitt and his performance, the reason I brought up, I'm not sure if I made this clear enough, but the reason I brought up Cliff Burton not only is because he's one of the greatest bass players heavy metal has ever known, but because Joseph Gordon-Levitt studied the mannerisms of Cliff Burton, and he sort of, this isn't a movie about Cliff or anything like that, but it's basically like, if I remember correctly from watching the interviews and things that I have seen about it with actors and directors and whatnot, and maybe even Cliff's father, this idea was blessed by the band, it was blessed by the label, it was blessed by the Burton family, and it was an intentional move that the character of Hesher was sort of mimicked after Cliff Burton. Cliff Burton was a really fun person. Everybody loved him. Everybody spoke very highly of him, but he knew how to party and stuff like that. So, I just wanted to throw that out there for anyone who hasn't seen or maybe wouldn't know why I mentioned that.
Yeah, well, and also those are great points. And the music in the movie is all Cliff Burton era Metallica. It's not all Metallica. There's some Motorhead and other things thrown in there, but it's Cliff Burton era Metallica. And watching the movie, it's funny because you're like, is this a movie? Like, is this the early 80s or is this now? And this guy, because it's like
that.
The guy's classic. Like, he could exist in any sort of time and he's going to look the same. Right.
Yeah.
But
anytime post 1987, that movie somewhere before cell phones and post 1987, you could place that film pretty much.
Yeah. The other thing is that, that you brought up was that this thing that's gone now. And I truly think this is gone, which is that how you discovered music, and you had your parents' music and you had your vinyl, and it's this process of like exploration in a weird way, especially for dudes, exploring music when you're in that age range, like let's say like 9 years old to like 14 is where you sort of solidify who you are as a person. And it's a lot of times it's echoed through music, and the music like sort of helps you discover, who you are and the things that you like and the things that you believe in. What do you think is cool, basically? And they sort of, they your friends, you and your friends kind of coagulate together based on music tastes. And I think that, we all, I mean, I did the same thing. My parents, I have my dad's vinyl collection, and I spent so much time. The first record that I remember, I remember in 1983, I was 3 years old, and I remember my dad bought the Thriller album, like the vinyl. And I remember opening it up, and there's this picture of Michael Jackson. And then my dad came home one day from work, and he had shaved his mustache off. And I said, "Dad, you look just like Michael Jackson." And then from there, it's like I remember getting an Elvis tape, and then basically it was the Doors. And I still love the Doors, and and you go through these things until you start to discover like the music that's made in your era. And I think that is completely gone, because one thing that technology has done is, because it's opened up, everybody knows this, but because music has opened up, it's democratized. All music is available at all times. It's ubiquitous. You can pick anything, and it's basically free. There's no choice. There's so much choice that there's no choice.
Yeah.
And kids don't really, they're unaware of this sort of process of like going through things one at a time. Like, when we had tapes, you had to listen to the whole tape, and you had to like fast forwarding or rewinding through the tape is like a laborious process that now is just instantaneous. So it's taken away that thing. And I think that's sort of emblematic for the world in a lot of ways. And so the movie, what happens in the movie is basically we get this kid, and he's probably about 12 years old. He's in middle school, and we see that he's living at home with his dad. His dad is played by Rainn Wilson, the guy from The Office, and his grandmother is there, his dad's mom, I guess, and she's played by I forget who she's played by, but they're
Piper Laurie.
That's it, Piper Laurie, yes. And they're at home, and the dad, you can see that the dad is zoned out. This is like suburban home. Kid, there's just nothingness. Kid goes to school, and he's got this bully. This bully is picking on him. And we learned that when he goes home, I'm kind of glossing over stuff, but when he goes home, we learned that basically his mom is noticeably absent. And we learned that his mom, that he was in the car with his mother when they were killed when his mom was killed in a car accident. And so the kid goes over to the wrecking yard, and he's chasing after this car. He wants to find the car, and he goes up to the owner of this place, and he's like, you can't destroy the car, because the car, we learned that the kid has suffered through this thing. Not only is his mom gone, but he was there when it happened. And he was at the particular age when, this is really split him. Right. And so all he has left is like this memory of his mother in this car. And basically the owner of the place tells him, we're going to crush the car. There's nothing you can do. It's already sold. And that the bully that he has is the son of the guy who owns the wreck yard. And also that guy, by the way, is the guy. I like this actor. He's the guy that plays, if anybody's seen American Horror Story, the one with Camp Redwood, 1984, he plays the serial killer, Mr. Jingles.
Yes. That's right. I was trying to figure out where I knew him from recently. I'm glad you brought that up, because I was like, oh, this guy is a pro. I know this guy from something recently.
Yeah, he's really good. He also, like, he either plays a nice, wholesome dad character in every movie, or he plays a guy that looks like that's belied by the fact that he's a serial killer. Like, remember he was in Zodiac. It's basically intimated at the end of the movie that he's the Zodiac killer. Because he does this thing where he's like, Jake Gyllenhaal goes into the place where the guy works, and he's like, I know you're the Zodiac. And the guy's like, I'm not the Zodiac. Stop harassing me. Or am I? Right. He's this huge guy. He's bald, but he plays Mr. Jingles in that TV show. But anyway, so the bully is his son. And So the kid's going through all this, all this shit, and then all of a sudden, Hesher materializes, and he's Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and he's in like black jeans, black boots. He spends most of the movie with his shirt off. In fact, does he ever put a shirt on? I don't know if he ever puts.
He wears he has a black and gray flannel, the classic rocker black and gray, like pre-grunge metalhead flannel.
Right. And he's got this tattoo of, a middle finger on his chest or on his back, and he's got a guy like blowing his brains out on his chest.
If I may.
Yeah.
If I may. I love the not so subtle band shout outs, limited amount of band shout outs that he's billboarding on his body. This middle finger right here, that's emblematic of Overkill's classic EP, Fuck You. I think I remember Matt wearing one of those shirts and just being like, oh my God, they let this guy come to school with a giant middle finger on the back of his shirt. Like you would see these people that had seen that Overkill show or mini Overkill shows with the giant, flip off on the back. So he had that tattooed on the back, and the one on the front with the stick figure blowing his brains out.
Yeah.
It's in my estimation, that is a shout out and homage to Gigi Allen. Because Gigi Allen had similar style. The style itself, I think, is emblematic of Gigi Allen, and that tattoo in particular, there is one on Gigi Allen of someone killing himself with a knife that looks about the same, but they're brilliant. And the Misfits tattoo on the shoulder too.
That's right. Yeah. And you know what? This is why we had you on here. To give us the lore of the tattoos and to know the esoteric knowledge of this guy's symbolism. And also, y'all, I mean, please just like and share the stream, because it's I don't think you understand how awesome it is that we have Hesher here. He's a very busy guy. He's got a lot going on, and he's very kind to come here on the show. And I thought it would be sweet because just personally, I wanted to do this because I wanted to do something that it's deep, and it has it's meaningful, and there's a lot of darkness in it. But there's a lot of darkness in the world right now. And I think that I wanted to do something that was fun, that was music related, and that we don't, that we can get away from all the bullshit that we usually have to dive into, with this stuff. But of course it's going to go into that because it's art. So, and especially with the Misfits tattoo.
Yeah. Well, dude, that's the beauty of a dark comedy. And I think, like, depending on where you're at in your life and where your emotional body might be sitting when you view this movie, you can find it endearing, you can find it funny, you can find it heartbreaking, like it will move you. This movie will probably move you unless you're just super dull.
Yeah.
And I agree with you, because right now it's a really dark time, and I don't think we would get through it without a sense of humor and the ability to sort of use other hard situations as a mirror, and I think this film is amazing at that. There's parts where Joseph Gordon-Levitt will just deadpan someone, like when grandma is upset because father and son are fighting, she tells her, she just pours her heart out to him, and he just stares at her, and you have about 15 seconds to think, like, what would I say right here? Like, that's what I was thinking. Like, what would I say right there? And I look at him just deadpanning her and waiting until she feels better, and then going about her business. And then he tells her a joke. I thought that was like just completely brilliant, the way that was written and acted.
Yes. Yeah. And it really, I mean, it defies expectations in the sense that, for instance, the first time that we see him getting bullied and Hesher sees this, he doesn't stop it. And he lets it happen. And now later on, when we see the kid's car, Hesher's going to appear and he burns the kid's car. And he's an arsonist, right? Of course he's an arsonist. And I think that the symbolism about this character is interesting, because it's like this guy is about as close to pure anarchy as I've ever seen in a movie. I mean, the philosophical ideal of anarchy is embodied in this character, and for better or worse, whatever that is, this guy is it. Everything he does in this movie, you can't ever predict what he's going to do. And in a lot of ways, I saw this as like, one of the I guess examples that people like to cite now about that kind of character would be the Heath Ledger Joker character, which is totally different from the Joaquin Phoenix Joker. The Heath Ledger Joker. Remember, Master Wayne. Master Wayne. When I was in Burma, we found rubies the size of grapefruits. Some people just want to watch the world burn, Master Wayne. And it's like you get this Joker character who he's got all this money and he sets it on fire, right? And he tells these stories, and the stories always change. And I mean, that's kind of it. But this guy is like that times infinity, because he's got nothing to gain and he's got nothing to lose. He just sort of exists in this place. And he latches on to this kid. And so one of the things I thought was interesting was that when I was watching the film, I could not tell for a lot of it whether he was imaginary, whether he was a split, whether he was a product of the kid's split mind, because the kid goes through all the hallmarks of the things that would create this kind of character, right? He's 12 years old. He was in the car at a violent death. His mother's been ripped away from him. His dad doesn't care about him. His grandmother has dementia. He has no friends. He gets picked on at school. He's got pretty much nothing. And so, it's like, does that kind of trauma, as they say, create this imaginary friend, this character? And in many ways, he sort of is that. But you learn that he's a real character because first of all, he interacts with the other people in the movie. And so what ends up happening is Hesher eventually gets to know the kid, and then he just moves into the house, right? And I'm kind of skipping over a lot here, but
hold up. Let me clarify one thing here real quick. We're skipping over the part where in the very beginning, like right after you see the kid go after the car, they're towing away the car. He endos his bike. However they did this stunt. If that kid, if Devin Brochu, if you're out there, if you did that stunt yourself, bravo, that was amazing. I rewound that part 3 times when I watched it this time, because he does it. He's already in a bad place. He feels terrible. He's grieving. He hits his front wheel of his bicycle in a construction zone. He endos. He falls off his bike, and he snaps. He's mad. He grabs a rock. He throws it into the glass window of a house that's still being built. And that's when Hesher first appears. Then the kid turns his back, and you just see this menacing figure with a guy committing suicide, a stick figure committing suicide on his chest, come out, and he grabs the kid and he brings the kid inside and he pushes him up against the wall and he says, "You just fucked me." And then he like throws him down. He grabs all his shit and he grabs a cherry bomb or a multi M80, and because a security guard's showing up, and he's been squatting there. And this kid screwed it up by breaking the glass, triggering security. So then he stalks the little guy basically and gets to know what's going on in this little guy's life. That's why he keeps showing up. And when he realizes that he's from the kid is broken, he's being picked on. There's a really old lady there and a depressed guy on medication there. And he says, "Fuck it, I'm just moving in." He just comes in and goes, "Where's the washing machine?" Takes off all his clothes, starts washing stuff. And then he goes to the television. He sits down in his underpants and he's like, "There's only 3 channels here, you guys." And everybody in the house is just looking at him like, "Who the fuck is this?" And he literally in his underpants goes out and he gets a spoon, climbs up the pole and goes and splices someone's cable in and comes back in and just sits down and starts watching porn. He's like, "You got more channels now." And like, he showed right there the whole like spectrum of what you can expect from this person. Like, he will scare you. He'll commit a crime in front of you, because why not? And then he'll stalk you and figure out what your life is and then move into your house, but then make it better. Walk in there and have some morals and be nice to your grandma and get your dad a full cable connection. So that's, and it's weird the way he does, like, it's like there's always these scenes where he's appearing. But when I watched it this time, I kind of felt like he was just like automatically a big brother to this little guy.
Yeah, and he's got it, and it's funny you bring up the technical ability, and when he climbs up that pole, it's like he's a beast, man. This guy is like raw. He's like, it's like, who is this dude? How does he have these abilities? How can he do these things? How can a person exist and just do. That's what I meant by the anarchism. It's like this guy just does exactly what he wills, I guess, all the time. It's not even like what he wants or doesn't want. He just does these things with no regard for any of the rules. And it really shows you also that a lot of the rules are bullshit, right? Not that I'm not. I mean, obviously, like if some dude moved into your house and you're there with your dad, and this grown man is sitting in there, you'd be like, get the fuck out. I mean, so it becomes a sort of a figurative. It almost isn't real, but we see what he's accomplishing through this. But like this guy, he just does exactly what he wants all the time, and like you said, he fills this kind of weird void, in the family dynamic. And I think that the dad is so out of it. He's so completely gone, and he has no balls. I mean, this guy has no will. He's just got nothing, right? So he just says, who's this guy, and that's it. I think that the it's interesting you bring up the broken window. Whenever we see windows or broken windows in movies, it's always, we saw this in Lost in Translation is the most recent one. Scarlett Johansson is sitting there and she's looking out over the landscape, over the cityscape in Japan, and she is disconnected from other people. She's disconnected from reality, and she's searching for something. She's searching for herself. She sees the city out there. She's looking, down on the city, and yet we see her reflection in the window. So she's also gazing, into herself. And in this, it's like the kid sees this home, and the home represents what he's got a house. He's got a house, but he doesn't have a home, I guess you could say, in a kind of a cheap way. But he at the moment where he's flipped over, he's inverted himself, right? And he picks up this rock and he throws the rock at the window, and he shatters the window. So he's shattering the sort of looking glass. And what he sees materialize from the other side is this guy, right? With, like you said, with the tattoos and, and death. And the other thing it makes me, wonder about in the movie is the character, is Hesher supposed to be, he's obviously supposed to represent a kind of a Grim Reaper character in a way, because death has been visited on the family. They play Creeping Death, right? Yep. They play the Metallica song Creeping Death, which is about the angel of death. And this guy appears, he rides around town in this black murder van, We
had one of those too. It wasn't quite as beat up. It was Matt's parents' van, and it was tan, and Matt's last name is Mann, so it's very famous in heavy metal history in the early 90s, because we would pack 13 Heschers and whichever of them could achieve girlfriends, which is usually 2 or 3, into this van, and we would call it the Tan Man van. So we would, like, between 2 towns of Heschers, we would load it full and drive down and see, like, I saw people in the chat talking about seeing Pantera. We went down, we saw a Vulgar Display of Power tour in that van. We would go see Death. We would go see all these things. But the van was another, like, crucial thing. Like, I guess that's kind of a holdover from hippies, because hippies obviously gravitated toward vans, because it's a roving house pretty much.
Right.
And, this van ain't a rocking. You know what to do. Don't come knocking. So yeah, anyway, I love that parallel. I love the van, the like, shitty van. Like, it fits with someone like him. Whereas now you see like a white van with no windows. What do you call it? You go, oh, it's a rape van. Great.
Right.
You know what I mean? But the back in that day, it was like, oh, it's a Hesher van,
There was a dude that lived near my friend, and he was this older dude, in his early 20s when we were teenagers, and he had a mullet. And this guy would park his van right on the front yard and would play metal, like with super loud speakers and subwoofers, and just sit there and cash beers on the front step all day. So it was the same. There's always one of these dudes, right?
Yep.
But
they always recognize me too, dude. They still, to this day, I tell you what, man, I could cut my hair and cut my beard and wear a plaid or polo shirt, and I don't know what it is, man. They can find me. I did that once. I was all just completely clean cut, out doing corporate things and for my job, and I'd be walking around with, like, boomers and polo shirts and stuff going to
Yeah.
lunches on travel. And I'd be the person, dudes would come up to me, hey man, you want to buy some weed? Or, they'd make some metal comment and be like, how do you, I'm not even, it's not on my sleeve today. I don't know what the hell. We can smell each other, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. So Hesher lives with the family. And eventually we get introduced to Natalie Portman's character. Natalie Portman. Yeah. She's, Natalie Portman is working at this, dead end grocery store job. She's a cashier or whatever. And how do we get introduced? Is it when her car breaks down? I forget what happens to her.
Well, she originally meets TJ because she stops him from getting his ass kicked by Dustin, the son of the wrecking ball guy, the car wrecking guy.
Yeah.
So she helped him out when he was about to get his butt kicked and saved him. And then that was when he kind of developed a crush on her. And then as Hesher got to know him, he realized that TJ had a crush on this, girl who's like marginally too old for him.
Yes.
I mean, what is it with Natalie Portman and what age she is? I could never tell, like all the way back from Leon the Professional to Star Wars and her like falling in love with Anakin, where he's like 10 in one movie and then 18 in the next, and she looks exactly the same. And like, what age do you think she's supposed to be in this movie? Because she was 29 when they filmed this.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that it's supposed to be sort of this nebulous age where she's supposed to be both a mother figure and, a love object for the little kid. Right.
Right.
And,
Okay.
and it's interesting because I related to that in one way, because when I was younger, I had this babysitter named Mary who was probably the same age difference, and she was a teenager, and I was in love with this girl, and she had this boyfriend, Patrick, who drove a Trans Am, and I was so jealous of this guy because, I really wanted Mary, but I was like 5 years old. But I know that she's about my age in real life. I know she's about my age because I remember when I was a teenager, I stayed up late one night. I was 14. I stayed up late one night to watch Green Day on Dave Letterman, and she was the guest, and he said to her, so we've got Green Day coming up. And she goes, who's that? And he was like, you don't know who that is? Like, you don't know who that is? Even I know who that is. And I'm the host of the show. And she was like, I don't know anything about music. And I remember thinking like, what the fuck? How do you not know this? You're my age. So that's why she's my age. But yeah, so the kid, TJ has a crush on her, and they have sort of I'm kind of glossing over the plot here. They sort of have adventures. They go through some shenanigans. They end up going to a house that's for sale, I guess. And Hesher goes up. They go back in the backyard, and he jumps in the pool. And at first, you're like, yo, this is fun. This is awesome. Then he starts throwing everything into the pool. He lights the diving board on fire, jumps into the pool, and then leaves.
He ditches him.
He ditches him. And
what does he say before he ditches him?
I forget. What does he say?
I'll tell you. He just utterly destroys this back. Well, first he pushes them in the pool rather violently, not just on the edge of violently, without them knowing. Surprise pushed them into the pool, and then he destroys the place, lights the thing on fire, dives in, gets out, and then walks out. And as he's leaving, he's like, I gotta go. And they're like, where are you going? And he's like, got a doctor appointment. It burns when I pee. And he just goes and he gets in his murder van and drives off and leaves them there with all the dogs barking and just pool on fire.
So they have this weird misfit relationship, right? This older girl she's got nothing. She's a pathetic figure in that she's full of pathos, right? She can't earn enough money to pay her bills. Her car breaks down. Her job sucks. The kid has nothing. His family sucks. And Hesher is the guy thrown into the middle of all this. And while they're at home, he starts to, like you were mentioning earlier, he has this relationship with the grandmother. And the grandmother is I don't know what you would call her. She's incapable of intervening with the family because of her condition. But she's obviously somebody who is, at least he sees, is still like a witness to all this stuff. And they're also like not taking care of her. Right.
Yeah. She's very sickly looking throughout the picture.
She's very sickly. She wants to go for a walk. And he listens to her, and then eventually what happens in the movie is that the kid goes back to the wrecking ball yard. The car is gone, and everything sort of falls apart, and then the grandmother dies. And then we get to the final scene in the. I'm skipping a lot, but we get to the final scene in the movie where we have the funeral scene, or the memorial service, and they ask TJ, who's the kid, to say a few words for his grandmother. He can't really say anything. It's a really weird scene, because you're putting all of this stuff on this 12-year-old kid, right, to speak, especially at this thing, as if he's capable of understanding all these events.
2 months after his mom died,
Right.
in a car crash with him.
And his dad is just not, he's just nothing. He's going nowhere. He's a total loser, and the kid he's so angry at his father the whole time. I mean, rightfully so. His dad is doing nothing for him. And then Hesher shows up at the funeral drunk. And he walks up there, and he's cashing beers. And he gives a speech, and he gives a hell of a speech. And do you remember what his speech is about?
No, you're gonna have to remind me, because I've got the beginning down so good, because I tried to cram it in today between shows, but I didn't make it all the way to the end. But I remember the scene, the feel, the vibe, but I don't remember what the speech said.
Right. So he gets up and he gives the speech, and it's not about the grandmother. It's not about any of the events. He doesn't mention the kids. All he says is that he was playing with fire, and he burned one of his balls off. And he said he spent so much time thinking about how he lost one of his balls. What's he going to do? And there's all these people at the memorial service, like completely shocked, right? What's he going to do? He can't, he's lost one of his balls. It's his ball. What's he going to do? And it goes on for a while, but then he says, and then I realized I still have one. I still have one left. And so what you obviously take from it is that the thing that is precious to you in terms of biologically precious to you, he still has hope, right? Because he can still perform his he can still be himself.
Yeah.
And even though there's a member of the family, I mean, it's a crude allegory and a crude metaphor, but nonetheless, he's saying that although one person is gone, he still has his unit and one ball left. He still has his dad left, and he's got his family. He's got a home, and he can still live. He's got to keep LIVIN, right? Yeah. And then he says the one thing that the grandmother wanted to do was she wanted to go on a walk, and he regrets. It's the only time that he expresses like any kind of regret. He regrets that he never went on this walk with her. So he says, fuck it, I'm going to take her on a walk right now. So he grabs the casket on the wheels, and he pushes it out the door through the crowd.
Yeah.
And this is a galvanizing, it's shocking when this happens. At this point in the movie, it's not shocking, but he galvanizes the family to walk outside. They break through the doors of this funeral like they've escaped death. And they all put their hands on the coffin, and they walk her around the block. And then we see that in the next scene that the dad he comes in, he's clean shaven, he's bright eyed, and he's going to work, or he's going to go find a job. And so we see that this series of events it's interesting that it's set in the valley. I see this as like it's a metaphor for the movie takes place like in the valley of the shadow of death. And once they come to terms with the grandmother's death, it allows them to come to terms with his mother's death, and that they are still alive and they have to keep living. And then we see the camera kind of, pan up, and then on the roof of the house, it says Hesher was here. Yeah. And that's it. So it's an interesting movie because all of the, first of all, again, I think that everybody really should watch this movie. I mean, people do not watch movies anymore. And, I was watching a meme yesterday, and it was talking about, it's like one of those Instagram reels, right? And it's like, it's 1993. Your friend's mom comes home, and she's got Blockbuster, and it's a Friday night. What are you going to watch? And I thought of when I was younger, and I would go to my friend's house, and his mom would come home, and she had One Crazy Summer and then 2 other movies like for his sisters, and we watched One Crazy Summer like 4,000 times. And it's like this time when you watch any movie just because it's on or it's available. And now there's so much choice, people don't really watch movies anymore. But I think as an adult, everybody should watch this movie or a movie like this because number one, you don't know what you expect it to be, and it becomes, I mean, it's really art. It's written by, I didn't know the movie was written by David Michaud, the guy who wrote Animal Kingdom, the Australian screenwriter. He wrote Animal Kingdom. I think he wrote The Proposition. And the director is like a camera operator. He hasn't directed, much other stuff. It's really a character driven movie. The script is sort of like, there's so much darkness in the movie but the events described are all kind of, everyone sort of goes through these kinds of things, but it's character driven because it's the characters who bring life to all of the things that happen in this. So a couple of things that I found about this. One is that I just thinking about like the symbolism in the movie and what it's about. I think that it's really interesting. You were bringing up Metallica and how they, gave the okay for this movie. I think that people don't really realize like what it takes for people to get music in a movie. It in a way, it's like as if I wanted to play Metallica on the stream times, 4 million, right? I mean, if you're going to do a major production, you have to get the okay from the band, and bands like this don't do that. I remember the first time I heard Metallica in a movie, and it was probably when they played Master of Puppets in that scene in Old School, right?
Yeah.
That was like one of the only scenes I'd seen. Or like Led Zeppelin is never allowed in movies. You can't play a Led Zeppelin song in movies.
Very, very rare. Yeah.
Yeah,
Maybe once I've seen like Immigrant Song or something, but I can't really place it.
Right. So yes. So Immigrant Song was used by Jack Black in School of Rock. And, I mean, who knows about Hollywood, but the story is, and I actually believe this, that the story is that, he had to go when he introduced them for the Kennedy Center honors, right? It was like a chance. I think that was later on, but he had approached the band personally, or he'd approached John Paul Jones and said like, we know you don't put this music in, but like, just check out a cut of the movie and this will be, if you say it's okay. So I know Metallica watched a cut of this movie and gave the okay. Also, it's all Cliff Burton songs. But one of the things about the movie is that I find it interesting that the car wreck, it was about a car wreck, right? So yes, that's a normal sort of thing, I mean, people die in car wrecks, and it's awful that the kid is in the car with his mother. But to me, that was the driving force for Hesher to appear in the first place because it's metallic, right? Because it's industrial, it's automotive. I mean, Motorhead, the song Motor Mouth is used in the thing. Everything is about motors. And, I just wanted to get your take on, everybody back in the day remembers that the first metal Grammy, right, was given to Jethro Tull, right? So Metallica and all these bands are up for the first metal Grammy, and they give it to Jethro Tull. And I think that in a weird way, follow me on this. In a weird way, this makes sense, and here's why. Because I realized when I was listening to Ride the Lightning that metal music takes a lot from it sort of exists in this place that the music derives from industrialization and warfare. Okay. And what I mean is this, that when you listen to classical music echoes the sounds of nature, right? Jamie just did a stream on Fantasia and talking about the classical music and that. And, that's a good illustration of how, the nymphs are, they sound like the wind and the babbling brooks. And then what happens is you have the plague, and the plague in the post-plague world, you have troubadours and traveling musicians. And then that eventually gives rise to like Henry VIII era, Renaissance green sleeves music. And then with metal music, this is kind of a far metaphor here, but when you have metal music, it kind of comes from warfare, industrialization, and it mimics the sounds of war and industry. That's why it's heavy. That's why it's kind of chugging. It can thrash, especially in what you were talking about growing up, the 80s and post Vietnam era. So you said like the hippies always, they always called you Satan, and the hippies in their vans and all this shit. And then we have Nam, and then out of Nam we have like the way that the society, this kind of malaise in society, and then that results in the middle class and in the valley and in these open spaces and in nothingness and nothing to do, and then that results in metal music.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
so I think that it's funny that like when you listen to Fade to Black, right, the Metallica song Fade to Black, which is clearly like the structure of the song is a Renaissance song, and it almost sounds like as if you took Jethro Tull and made it metal in a way. And I think that makes sense. This is my kind of thesis for the movie. That makes sense for the movie because the kid's death and the driving force for the rest of his life is going to be, number one, the automobile accident, and then the crushing of the metal that he sees in the junkyard. So no matter what, when the car represents his mother, that's where he saw his mother last. But no matter what, it won't go away. You can't obliterate it. It's always going to be there. So when he sees this crushed up version of the car, it's like his mother has been crushed up, but she's still there, and his life has been crushed up, and it's still there. Does that make any sense?
Oh, it totally does. And, I think that that's exactly why I, bloviated so long about growing up with heavy metal around me, because I think that a piece of, thesis that I could maybe add to that is that Hesher appeared and he collected all of the knowledge that he needed to understand that situation. He sees TJ getting his ass kicked. He sees TJ being forced to eat the urinal mitt. He even,
yeah.
I assume that the viewer is supposed to assume that Hesher was the one that painted on Dustin's car, the suck my cock on Dustin's car, violated his car to escalate that bullying, because Hesher wanted to teach TJ a lesson. He wanted to teach TJ how to be fearless. And that's why I think that older brotherhood and is a thing in this movie, and that's why I kind of related it back to myself too. So obviously, I use the movie as a film. If you watch the beginning of the stream, you can see how much. But he and then he takes him and he shows him. He says, "This is what freedom is, and this is how to protect yourself. I'm not going to come in and stop this guy from kicking your ass.
Yeah.
You're going to eat the urinal mitt." And then later on, you know what? You're going to get in my fucking van. We're going to listen to some Metallica. We're going to drive over to that little puke's house, and we're going to light his fucking car on fire. You know what I mean? Like, that's the kind of attitude that he's dealing with there. And the kid, it's like too much for the kid at first. He recoils from it. He gets questioned by the police for it. He wants him to leave him alone. And then there's, Hesher's in the bathtub, and the kid comes. He says, "I want you to leave. I want you to leave me alone. How could you do this to me?" And this is where I think that the leading by example comes in, where this little guy, this young man, needed someone to lead by example. Is he appropriate? No. Do I condone any of his behaviors? No. Would I want that person helping my kid? Well, maybe. I mean, if that was that kid's situation, sure, that's the best you got. You got to roll with it. But what he taught him was how to no longer be afraid. He taught him to be fearless. He taught him to appreciate his family. He taught him how to take a hit and how to get back up. And more importantly, he taught him through the use of that musical product that you're talking about, the product of hundreds of years of industrialization of, our society and our minds, and that metallic, crushing of the metaphor of his family, with his mom in that crappy red car. When Hesher puts him in the van and plays him Metallica, and they go out and they have a little bit of fun, he doesn't realize it, but to Hesher, this is what fun is. It's going out hanging out with your buddies, messing with them, kicking each other in the balls, whatever, doing crazy shit, lighting stuff on fire, listening to heavy metal, smoking joints. He's trying to pass everybody joints in the van. You're like, this kid, how was this kid? 12? This chick's 18.
Yeah.
He just met her. But he essentially taught him how to have a form of life that's a free form, a freedom that he was maybe about to lose with the crushing weight of, events, circumstances, family, and society on him at that vulnerable place in time. And it also taught him how to maybe deal with the negativity of others, because that was one of the worst things that he was dealing with. So to me, there's like a big brother factor there, and there's a healing element of that heavy metal lifestyle of the late 80s and early 90s, and that culture kind of spun into it in a way that is really good. It's a real, like you said, it's an independent film. It's not a Hollywood film. Obviously the actors in it gravitated towards it because they were all very successful at that time. They gravitated towards it because it's a well-written script. And you know what else is really funny? I didn't think of this till we were just talking about it, and you were kind of giving me your thesis there. And you've talked about him just appearing all the time. This is almost like a like a suburban heavy metal Mary Poppins
It
story.
is. Yes, it is. It is. Yeah. Yeah. I've seen that point made a few times, and it is pretty apt. It's interesting because one of the things that it's great that you bring that up, because one of the things that happens in Mary Poppins is, of course, that you have this family and they exist in the kind of sterility of what they're supposed to do in society, and they're in the house and they have rules. And then this character appears literally out of the sky, like floating on an umbrella, and nobody questions it. Right? She just exists, and she shows them, how to live life and how to do these things and how they're going to make it, as themselves. And that's exactly what Hesher does. Right? I mean, he doesn't appear out of the sky, but in a way he does. Right? I mean, he materializes out of nothingness, and the sort of the chaotic element that you see in him is reflective of what's going on inside the kid. Right. Which is why at times you think, is this a real character or is this an imaginary friend? The same thing happens, but on the other side, like from Natalie Portman, because she's an adult, but who has a very, I don't know if it's a childlike mindset. I mean, she's going through her work, but she breaks down easily. She's weak.
She's depressed. She's alone and depressed.
She's depressed, but she still maintains some femininity, and of course, he's the sort of answer to everything that she wanted, which is also unpredictability, danger, a kind of a same with the kid. It's like this kid appears and he's kind of if her age group wanted a kind of a family, or was subconsciously, yearning for some sort of family dynamic, then this is what appears. And also the interesting thing is that Hesher, when he catches Hesher and Natalie Portman having sex, and this hurts his ego, Hesher doesn't disappear, right? He doesn't say that he cares, but he shows that he cares by continuously showing up at times, and he understands the kind of fugitive nature and the like brutality that the kid is going through because of what he's been with them the whole time through this thing. And I think that it takes the grandmother dying for them to sort of unify as this group and for him to have a resolution. But it is interesting that he doesn't disappear for all of his chaotic nature. He does care. And he's like a brother, I mean, it's in a way it's like an archetypal rite of passage, because the kid experiences this loss of innocence. He witnesses death firsthand, the death of his mother. He's in the accident himself. He's probably got a traumatic head injury, which he's also dealing with. It's nobody, knows or cares about. He gets punched in the face by this bully. The bully represents his nemesis. The bully is the son of, in a cruel twist of fate, is the son of the guy who's going to destroy his mother's memory.
Yep.
I was also thinking throughout the thing that maybe Mr. Jingles would give him a chance to buy back the car,
Mr.
But
Jingles.
yeah, but he never does that. And
Nope.
and that also echoes real life, right? Because the guy's running a business and he doesn't care about this kid, and he's going to sell is already promised to somebody else. But Hesher provides this um weird paradoxical stability for him. He's a completely unstable character, but he's stable in the life of this kid.
Yeah.
So like you said, he doesn't beat up the kid the first time he sees him, and he teaches him that you got to fend for yourself. I mean, I don't know any dude that like didn't go through that in some way or have somebody like that in their life, especially at that age.
That's the
Um,
thing. That's why it resonates so well to people, and I think that the Natalie Portman character, um, Nicole, I think that she probably speaks to a lot of her character probably speaks to a lot of young women too, from who may have experienced various styles of family and society
right.
in that era, and just that anomalous person that comes through that would say and do whatever they wanted, whatever they were thinking. You know what I mean? It's like the first time he met her, he tells her a story about banging 3 girls in the back of his van, like, and nobody does
Yeah.
that when they first meet someone except for, that character, that archetype. And it's just like it like shocks them out of whatever they're self-obsessed with, and you can see with both characters that it takes, and Rainn Wilson's character too, it takes multiple hits, like it takes multiple bad things or difficult things to have happen, or even ones that he sort of creates, sort of situationally creates, even pushes them into bad situations in some places, and you think, is he doing this on purpose to teach them a lesson? But then there's, maybe he's not. He's just doing things because, he represents that sort of, like you said, that like anarchy, sort of chaotic, but, with heart and soul still involved somehow, that paradoxical, like chaos agent with a set of morals, that doesn't like it that grandma passes away before someone will take her around the block.
I think that this movie is relevant. One of the ways that it's relevant is because oftentimes we see how art can inform our own age by looking back to a previous age, right? The past is prologue. And the movie is about and made for an obvious pre Big Nine era world, post Vietnam, pre Big Nine, even pre Desert Storm era world. It's this time and place where, for instance, one thing is the middle class uh disillusion, the sort of nothingness, the angst that exists in the movie is, I mean, it perfectly represents that time. And that to me is either gone or is going. In the great reset era world that we live in, where everything's changed and everything's technological, and we've been through this horrible thing ourselves, it kind of it's a strange allegory. It gives you this weird lesson that um, nobody's coming to save you. You can't rely on necessarily on the figures of authority. You can't, you can't rely on the dude who owns the business or even the dad character in this. When you're learning to live and grow, you have to rely on yourself, and sometimes it takes a kick in the ass or from somebody else who knows a little bit more, for somebody older, to get yourself going and to get yourself out of your own shit. One thing for you guys, please make sure you like and share, by the way. And if you want to support the stream, please make sure that you see the links in the video description or in the chat right here. You can support us. You can share the stream. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. And thanks again to Hesher for being here. One thing that I found, I was just looking through analyses of the movie, and ordinarily I would never cite this on a streamer. But even I sometimes read them, but I would bother to cite them because they're sort of so surface level. But I found something from Roger Ebert's website.
No way. Cool.
Yeah, which I thought was actually pretty. I thought it was a pretty good breakdown. And I'm just going to read a couple parts of this. First of all, he says it starts off with Hesher assembles a group of characters who aren't sure why they're in the same movie together, and that is true. That's absolutely true because
It's true.
we have these disparate characters who don't seem to exist on the same plane, and yet they found themselves in the world together. And again, that's now. That's life now. Um, one by one, they have this attraction, but they're brought together. They're all elbows and angles. Everybody in the movie is sort of fighting against something. The title character, Hesher, is hauled into the movie as a classic Deus Ex Machina. Who thought that this review would be so deep, right?
Wow.
As if he's been lowered by rope into the middle of a situation he has no connection with. He's a fearsome heavy metal creature with charming tattoos on his back, an upraised middle finger on the chest, and a man shooting his brains out, which you discussed earlier, the symbolism. Hesher materializes. I love the verb that they use there. That's why I've been using throughout. Hesher materializes in the life of young TJ and moves into TJ's house. The film makes no attempt to explain much about who he is, where he came from, or precisely what he thinks about TJ's family. At first, he seems possibly an imaginary friend for the kid, but then we realize he's quite real, just inexplicable. Now, this is great. This is something that is oftentimes, this happened the other night when we were covering Lost in Translation, and my friend Chase Haggard was talking about how, oftentimes movie reviewers will say, Ryan Gosling made a brave choice in this movie. He decided Joaquin Phoenix made a brave choice to hunch himself over in terms of his physicality. And then we actually came upon that in a review of the movie. Somebody really did say that. So it's almost satirical how these people talk about movies. But I think one thing that is truly brave in this movie in terms of the filmmaking is that it goes all the way with something that I've talked about in literature so much in terms of literary analysis, and that is showing and not telling. The movie treats you, even though the movie is about a child, it treats you in a way where the movie makers or the movie understands that I, the audience, was once this character. And even though I don't have the same experience as this character, I understand what it's like to be him, and I understand the pain that he goes through. And that it shows us these characters without exposition, right? It doesn't attempt to explain who he is. He's just there. Now, that also plays into the narrative and into the way they make the film, but I thought that was an excellent point. It says, it's not as if Hesher is really a sweet guy. He's willful, obscene, offensive, and easily angered. It says Natalie Portman's character is the most straightforward in the film. She is who she seems to be. Rainn Wilson and Piper Laurie are good actors, and so for that matter is Joseph Gordon-Levitt. And here we can see what good actors do with inexplicable situations and undefined characters. This is a great point. In a way, this is pure acting, generated from within and not supported by a narrative framework. Consider Wilson. He has that rare quality in an actor, an uncanny presence. There are few like him. Jack Nicholson, Christopher Walken, Bill Murray, who need only to look at something to establish an attitude toward it. Yes, they can get worked up, they can operate on a high, but their passive essence is at that point dubious, wise, sadly knowledgeable, at an angle to the through line. Other actors could sit on a sofa and watch TV, but Rainn Wilson makes it a statement of nothing, which is the point. I thought that was incredibly adept.
That's very poignant. I'm a little blown away there. Yeah. I would not disagree with anything that was said there. That was really good.
Yeah, I mean, the Hesher character is so interesting because he's active. He's all action, right? Everything he does is action. There's no passivity in anything that he does. Everything is willful, and he chooses even if he's not consciously choosing it, everything is a performative action. Whereas Piper Laurie's character is just there, but is painful, in her eyes to see because we know her condition. And Rainn Wilson's character, at times you think he's overdoing it, but I think really embodies the nothingness. It's like he's not actively like working against his son. He's just doing absolutely nothing, which is where the pain comes from with his kid. He wants him to provide some sort of rules, some sort of rigidity for him.
And it's one of the few films where they show the worst aspects of what can happen to people who are grieving, that lean on pharmaceuticals and pharmacology to process with the grief. I mean, they show the only comment Hesher ever makes about Rainn Wilson's being overprescribed mood pills and depression pills. There's 4 of them. I paused it and I counted. There's 4 or 5. He has an argument with the son. They're having a bad day. Rain argues with the son. Son throws his dinner off the plate. Rain gets mad, throws his dinner off the plate. Everybody's sad. And he said, "Hand me my pills." And Hesher just, looks at him real slow, takes another bite of his mashed potatoes, chews it up, swallows it, stares at him the whole time like he's thinking about it, and he just grabs them violently and then sets them down again violently on the table and doesn't say a word. Like, he doesn't need to say a word. We know what he's thinking. We
Yeah.
know that that is the essence of why he can't get along with his son right now. We know that his son just bested him in verbal judo about what was going on in the room, and that poor grandma is sitting there, practically about to keel over, and that's what they're fighting over. So like that is a pretty stern red flag to people about big pharma right there inside of the story, and you just don't see that very often, and it's one of the critical issues I think that a lot of people, especially in America, are dealing with right now with regards to getting along with people. So the film becomes even more poignant because that has become a bigger problem.
Yeah, you really hit it on the head. I mean, he doesn't need to say anything. It's not written into the script that he has a speech. He doesn't berate, Hesher doesn't berate him about it. He doesn't the guy's an adult and he knows that he knows what he's doing. But just like he has to show the kid what is possible, but not do it for him, he does this for the dad as well. And I mean, I would also add that one of the notable absent things in the movie, and it's not a movie about this, but I think that all art is about, I've said this a bunch of times, but I think that all art is about 2 things. It's about our relationship with God, who we are and why we're here, like what's our purpose, and our relationship with each other. How are we going to love each other, or how are we going to get along? And one of the notable absent things in the movie is not only any sense of religion or kind of, traditional structure, but an absence of the normal family dynamics, right? Even just with the setup of the family, and they're doing what they can in the time, and I get it, but I think it's wild that with the lack of that in the movie, with this void, you get this Hesher character show up, right? And so at times he is a kind of Grim Reaper. At times he's kind of. I saw one analysis refer to him as a possible. What do they call a kind of a punk Jesus?
I like that. That's
Which
cool.
which I would expect from one of these analyses, but
I would have to step in and say a thrash metal Jesus. If
Yeah,
we're gonna go that, if we're gonna be that
exactly.
particular, I'm gonna have to correct them on that and say a thrash metal Jesus. But
But
carry on. I take the spirit.
he's more of a some sort of Promethean figure, right? I mean, because he literally brings fire,
Yeah.
so he materializes and he's kind of this dark angel or an angel of death, and yet he brings fire. And the fire, he's an arsonist, and he likes to burn things. Of course, he likes to burn things. He's metal. It's cool. And he burns the diving board before, the diving board into the pool where they have this kind of baptism. He burns
Iconic,
the
yeah.
car, but he's also supposed to represent this fire, like the fire of the human spirit that he's trying to share with the other character. Now, I don't think that's what the Promethean myth is. I think that's something different, but I think that that's what it's supposed to be in the film. And, that it's also funny that the last scene of the movie is a God's eye view looking down on the house with the graffiti on top of the house, right? So Hesher has left his mark with his family. And he will, he'll move on. I mean, you could also see the movie as like a dangerous drifter.
Yeah.
Follows a kid and moves in with his family and terrorizes them. I mean, I guess you could see, you can see it that way as well.
Yeah, that would be the short version that you might hear from some viewers. That might be what they take away from it, and I wouldn't hold it against them. It's
Right.
a pretty nuanced sort of thing.
The the New York Times analysis that came out at the time of the movie, which is in the end not favorable to it. And I think that it was not favorable because a lot of people, I can see a lot of people seeing this movie and getting annoyed with the kind of independent movie spirit that it has of quirky characters, but you have to get past that because it actually is not that at all. Yes, exactly like Beavis. I remember when Beavis would say that, and then they had to stop saying it on the show because a kid did burn his house down.
They took the lighter away.
Yes.
Season 1, if you can find season 1, allegedly the original Beavis and Butthead first 10 seasons are up on either one of the P ones. I think it's Paramount, maybe Peacock, but with the videos intact, which is something that's been missing from the world of media for a long time.
Yeah.
But in those early ones, I think in season 1, there was fire, fire, and he would like be flicking a bic, and then of course someone sues him. This was probably the last like PMRC style, like you can't be so rock and roll like lawsuit we ever had. Now it's just like burn everything, take all the pills, drink all the alcohol, do all these things, kids. Back it's a simpler time back in Beavis times.
The thing I took from Beavis and Butthead was, and this was a powerful thing for me, was that, do you remember they had the gym coach who was the Marine?
Oh yeah, Mr. Buzzcut.
Yeah, kick me in the Jimmy, right?
Yeah.
And he would say, a Marine can stand anything. Well, I used to spend all summer on my friends. We would bike ride everywhere, and we had mountain bikes, and we would ride around University of Richmond, and we would get on the trails. And every time I got on my bike, I would wreck it. Every single time I'd flip over the handlebars. We'd get chased by older kids, like in cars, and I'd slide down sideways. I remember the first time in 8th grade, I went to football practice, and I was covered in blood, covered in scars. But I got over it because when it would happen, I would stand there and I would say that to my friends. I'd go, a Marine can stand anything, and the pain went away.
Perfect.
But this this New York Times review is interesting because again, it's this, like, some of the verbs they use in it. It says the only reason to see Hesher, it starts off, the only reason to see Hesher is to cringe before Joseph Gordon-Levitt's portrayal of its scary, hardwired title character, a violent California drifter who barges into the home of a grieving suburban family, is given the run of the house. But it's interesting they say hardwired. And then later on, it says Mr. Gordon-Levitt's sinewy, supercharged performance is so visceral that it's hard to imagine that this is the same actor who was such a persuasively wistful puppy in 500 Days of Summer. That's absolutely true. This guy, I don't give a shit about the Oscars. I mean, it is what it is. But if it were anything, this guy would win an Oscar for some performance later on. I mean, he really is great in this movie. He hardly says anything. It's all physical. It says as Hesher continues its accelerating descent into bathos, TJ, aping Hesher, talks back to his father and stands up to the bully. He goes all the way to the junkyard to occupy the about to be scrapped car in which his mother died. At the same time, Hesher emerges as a scummy descendant of Zorba the Greek, or Maude from Harold and Maude. It's pretty cool, right?
I love that. That's great.
That's pretty good. But the verbs in the thing, sometimes you can find little nuggets in these things because the verbs are consistent because they're all mechanical. They're all automotive. And of course, that made me realize, and think about the fact that Hesher's van is sort of his, like, it's like his chariot.
Yeah.
Right. It's his chariot carrying him around town. It's a shitty van, and yet it's the one that doesn't break down. This guy he's self-sufficient, right? Just like with the hardwiring the cable into the house. He's almost all electricity and fire. And that's supposed to be a counterpoint to the fact that the mother died in this automobile crash.
Right.
The kid is midway between because he's on his bike, but the dad, you never see the dad driving the car.
No.
So I thought that was pretty interesting.
That is interesting, and I find it just endlessly entertaining that someone can look at the character and say that it's, a dangerous drifter. Today, I added a new word to my vocabulary today via Lionel from Lionel Media, who joined us on State of the Nation on TNT radio show. Sagacious.
Mhm.
Sagacious. I
Yes.
did not know that word, but it is a synonym of discerning, insightful, prudent, wise, perceptive, sapient, and sage itself. So sage-like, basically. That's I look at that character and that's the other reason I did such a long like tie into my personal life in the beginning, just to get that on the record for one, because people are always asking me like, where did this name come from? Is it associated with the film? But I look at the that character as sagacious. He's very sage-like,
Yeah.
and he's sage-like in the realms of, say, attributes like forbearance and intention and heart and growth. There's little things like that, masculinity, that he is represents, that are sagacious. So shout out to Lionel
Yeah.
for
I like
expanding my vocabulary today.
I like the fact that you said sapient, which is my favorite motto: Initium sapientiae timor domini. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Sapientiae, right? Sapient, wise,
Yeah.
interesting, sagacious.
Yeah, yeah.
The music choices in this, and this is probably the last thing that we'll go over with this. We can let Hesher go on to his life. The music choices are so interesting because, like you were talking about, I mean, these are all Cliff Burton Metallica tracks, and also they're used sparingly,
Yeah.
right? For instance, the first time we see Hesher, we get this riff. This is a very quick, yeah, yes. It's like, and there's some of the songs that are used on the soundtrack, for the folks at home are all Kill 'Em All, Ride the Lightning. I think there's some Injustice for All tracks in here, but the Shortest Straw, Fight Fire with Fire. There you go, Fire. Battery, of
Yep,
course.
battery.
Battery, because he's being battered by the bully. He's being battered by life, and also like a car battery, electricity. Anesthesia, Pulling Teeth, Rock Out by Motorhead. Oh, the Motorhead
Yeah.
bit is
Rock
so good.
out.
Yes. We get Motor Breath by Metallica. And just going over some of the lyrics.
Motor
First of
Breath,
all,
by the way, played during the scene where he has to snap Natalie Portman out of being depressed,
right.
by doing donuts in the van, in the murder van, in the dirt field and scaring the crap out of her. I love the way, and it was overblown, it was overdrive. They had the volume too high on purpose on the mix on the film, which I recognize, and I want to give a shout out to whoever did the audio design on that film. I mean, there's got to be a lot of metalheads behind this movie, to have it hit the way that it does.
This one analysis this guy wrote on WordPress I thought was interesting, because he says, a strange person inserts himself in the life of a dysfunctional family, at first seeming to be a hindrance, but time soon reveals that perhaps they have actually been sent there by fate to help the family work out their issues. It's certainly not a new formula, but I've said before, in movies like Drive, Hannah, Warrior, and The Lincoln Lawyer have all taught us anything this year. Imagine 1 year where Drive, Hannah, Warrior, Lincoln Lawyer, and Hesher all come out in 1 year. Not unlikely to happen. Well, actually, maybe with the vacuum of Hollywood right now, whenever whatever happens with that, maybe that will happen again. We'll get a glut of great movies. And yeah, mysterious, destructive force. The lyrics. First of all, we also got Creeping Death, and obviously, Creeping Death is about the angel of death in Exodus, and there's a creeping death in the film because the death of the mother creeps throughout this thing. Hesher kind of creeps in the movie, and then we get the death of the grandmother, which is obviously looming over the movie. I mean, we know that she's on her way out.
Yeah, you can feel it coming.
The song "Escape" is on "Ride the Lightning" is great.
Yeah,
because "Escape" is about breaking out and doing what you want to do, which is what Hesher does in this film, and what he's kind of teaching the kid to do in a sense, right? You got to break out of this I don't know what this thing that he's sort of bent under, which is his father in a way, right?
Right.
And they also do what's one of the other songs? Oh, Trapped Under Ice. They do
Yeah.
Trapped Under Ice from Ride the Lightning. And Trapped Under Ice, for anybody who doesn't know, is like Demolition Man, right? Simon Phoenix is trapped, cryogenically frozen.
Yeah.
Right. And so is the kid. In a way, Hesher in the film is kind of trapped under ice, and he is when they break the window and fire kind of burns the ice so that he materializes again into this film.
Your comment you made earlier about the breaking of the window being
Yeah.
like a mirror archetype. I think it's
Uh-huh.
also staggering that the kid broke the mirror in a youth rage, in a grief rage, and then immediately turned his back on it, right? And then Hesher
Right.
comes out, and what does he do? He grabs him by the scruff of his neck, his backpack, and his shirt, and literally drags him inside the mirror. Like if the house is the mirror, he literally drags him to the other side of the mirror in the
Right.
first 5 minutes of the film.
Interesting. Yeah, right through the looking glass. Right through the rite of passage into the other side of life.
Yep.
He learns who he is. He sees himself for who he is.
Full on adulthood, like right away. Like he
Yes.
went from being a kid who lost his mommy to breaking the mirror and being dragged to the other side of the mirror. And all of a sudden he's with a guy who's talking about banging girls. He's smoking weed actively in front of him. He's, stealing cable. He's driving like a madman. He's listening to Metallica and Motorhead. He's not taking shit from anybody. But he's really smooth with the grandmas and moms. He's that paradoxical nice guy. So yeah, I think that it's like that being pulled into the other side of the mirror is just like the innocence gone the second he became the active like figure in the kid's life.
Isn't it interesting? I mean, that the movie also presents these two sides of things that happen in life, which is like you were just saying, I mean, you're either immediately thrown into adulthood. Something happens. I mean, this even happened, this happens all the time as an adult. As we get older, we all know that, like, this has happened to me so many times in the last few years. You're with friends, you're with people that you love, and all of a sudden somebody's gone, right? They're there 1 minute, I come home 1 minute, my friend lives behind me, I see the car lights come in, and then the next day, his cousin comes over and tells me, no, he's gone, right? He's dead. And that, even as an adult, that's very, very hard to understand and to deal with. Just the simple fact that you're with somebody and then they're not there anymore, right? And just like him, he's there with his mother. He's in the car. They're in the wreck. She's gone. He's there staring at himself in the mirror. He breaks the mirror. He himself is gone. Now he's got to figure out who he is. And he's, like you said, he's thrown into adulthood. Or the other thing is that your childhood or your life is extended to the point where you are a man-child, or you regress into this kind of infantile behavior. And that is exhibited in the movie through his dad, through Rainn Wilson, because his dad, after all, is living with his mother at the house. He's got a son that he's not taking care of. He doesn't have to do anything. He's sitting there all day. He's, doing nothing. And in a way, it's like he's regressed into this sort of infantile nothingness. And that, I think, is, if anything, that's something to take away from this movie, that both are harsh, right? But both are life. And that, in a way, it's like there are so many people who are in the Rainn Wilson mode of life now, that you see that on the other side, there's something fiery and there is something beautiful about the Hesher attitude towards things, which is like grabbing life or going out and doing things or doing things unexpected, and not necessarily, not breaking into houses or, setting shit on fire, but using that as a metaphor for your life, and which is the opposite, the reverse of this Rainn Wilson sort of just he's just festering, right? He's just
Right.
this festering character. So
He's a victim of big pharma, essentially. I mean, Rainn Wilson has allowed himself to become a victim of big pharma in his grief, and his son is the one that suffers for it because he doesn't know how to be there for his son when he needs him. And this is just, this is emblematic of what happens a lot in society. The Luckily for this, for TJ's character, Hesher comes along and he's got a slightly better influence than he might have if he had, gone down and, I don't know, joined a gang or start, I don't know what, so many other things that a kid could get into than heavy metal and breaking shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he's a fugitive kind. He has fugitive instincts certainly that have been kind of thrust upon him.
Outlaw.
Yeah, total outlaw. And it's ironic because the guy that he meets is the like truest outlaw in the truest sense of the word. This guy is totally outside the law. Right. He's not even, he doesn't even give a shit. And
Yeah.
yet that's the guy that wakes him up into being a human being again, So anything else you want to say before we close this out? Sure.
Curious. This is a short esoteric question. There is a moment that I picked up in the beginning of the film where the kid's sitting home depressed, where TJ's home depressed, and he's focused and the camera focuses in real tight on a white rabbit. There's a moment of white rabbit symbology of some little tchotchke or hummel or something that probably meant something to his mom.
Yeah.
Am I going too far here? Am I
No.
getting esoteric? What did you take anything like from that?
Yeah, well, yeah, I think that's a good thing to point out. I mean, whenever we see symbolism like this in movies, it's always purposeful, especially with a film like this where all of the symbol. I mean, look, it's down to the very tattoos that the guy has on him. All of the set pieces in the movie, all of the various places he goes, all of the music is all controlled and is part of this work of art. And I think that there's obviously it's like when the kid makes him, eat the urinal cake. It's like, no, he's making the kid consume waste. He's showing that he's a wasteoid. I mean, he's shit to him, essentially, right? He's nothing. So he's degrading him, even though that's literally what it is on the surface. There's this symbolic take on that. And I think that whenever we see white rabbits in movies, it's always supposed to be that we are following the white rabbit down the rabbit hole. And then it kind of gets mixed because it's, then we go through the looking glass, right? So we go through the looking glass in the house, through the mirror. When, it's like in the Matrix when he walks into the mirror. Yes, he's walking into the true world. He's breaking outside of the prison planet, right? In the worldview of the film. But it's supposed to be that he is walking into himself and walking into what his psyche, into his psyche. And I think that the kid has, again, all the hallmarks of somebody with a broken psyche in this movie: the broken mirror, the traumatic brain injury, the dad who doesn't care, the grandmother who's, dead, living dead, the mother who's been taken away. He's 12 years old. He gets bullied. The adults don't care. I mean, there's so much, him flipping over the handlebars, like you said. There's so much in the movie where this could end up with a kid who has a completely split psyche and who is a different people. But I think that walking into the mirror and following the rabbit down the rabbit hole is where we meet Hesher, right? And so by walking into the mirror, he's also able to walk back out and discover who he is by the end of the movie. So it ends up being a not wholesome, but it is a positive tale by the end of the movie, right? And I think that one thing that's really inventive about this is that we have a character who on the surface to most people is completely unlikable, right? He has all of the characteristics of somebody who is not, we don't want in society. But I think that that's one thing that ends up being kind of based about the movie is that we see what the guy provides and we sort of go with it. And regardless of how you feel about him or what he represents or judgment, the movie's ultimately about the kid.
Yeah.
And the kid ends up okay at the end of the movie. And so that makes it a classical comedy, which is weird because a classical comedy ends in a wedding. rather than a funeral. It should be a tragedy, and there's a funeral at the end of the movie, but it ends up being a comedy in terms of a happy ending.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really, really inventive. I really like this movie.
And if you've ever known a Hesher in your life or are one yourself, there are things in this film that only you will be able to understand and resonate with. But at the same time, if that's all of us, I think at this point in life, everybody's known a Hesher of some sort. And, I want to echo what Theoria Zone said in the chat there. Metal and punk in the 80s was my weapon / armor against the world. And that's why there is a brother and sisterhood around heavy metal, especially from that period in time. There's something there, like you said. You might be able to find something similar in like electronic music or hip hop in some ways, but it's different. I would argue when it comes to that little subculture that was built up, and yeah, it's been great being here, man. And there's a lot to be said for those moments in history. And I think this film really captures it, and you can port it, around for a few decades. Really fun to sit and discuss it with you tonight, and really pleased to see everybody in the chat throwing out some of their memories and some of the bands that they're into. I saw some great shout outs in there, saw some friends and some Boiler Room listeners and some TNT listeners and some colleagues from ACR. So it's been great to hang out with everybody here on your stream tonight. And check us out over at alternatecurrentradio.com. Boiler Room every Thursday night, sometime after 9 p.m. Eastern. Don't come at us with this clock Nazi stuff. Am I allowed to say that on the platform? I'm sorry. I'm talking about clocks. I'm talking about timeliness. Don't come after us with your stuff. We're trying to be cool here. Yeah, and I don't know if I was allowed to make fun of big PHAR, who, but I did that just because I'm so used to doing it openly. I hope that doesn't cause you any problems here, buddy.
Listen, it's the internet, and with the clock thing, it's like people can always rewind, right? They can always go back and rewatch. So
that's right. That's right. And on TNT, also State of the Nation TNT, Kesh Bazed Analyzer with us on Boiler Room and over on TNTradio.live sometimes on State of the Nation, normally on Fridays. He's kind of taken to that Friday slot, but we'll get you back on there again real soon. Thanks for having me here tonight. Thanks for chatting about this movie with me. And I'll look forward to our next hangout, my friend.
Yeah, shouts out to Ruckus in the chat there too. I will say, just to end this, I think that the most powerful thing, one of the most powerful things to take away from this film is the fact that what you can really read into this is the fact that something you were just talking about, which is that people who are into metal, especially, there's something noticeable about them almost as an archetype, which is that the developing this sort of intuition about music and understanding it as a culture and understanding it about who they are. This always leads to people who are at the same time they are both independent. I mean, I'm hard pressed to find somebody who's not an example of this. Somebody who's both independent and also part of a community. And what I mean is that listening to this type of music, especially, leads to something where the listener understands critical thinking in a way that other people do not, or that they lack. And I found that about a lot of people who are into metal music. And that, because of the circumstances that lead to it and because of what it represents as a culture, you often find this. And I think that, I would, I think this is probably true of you in the sense that what you do is completely different, obviously, from like your 12-year-old, self listening to metal. You may never have even thought that you would like end up in the place where you are now, but it's a natural progression to me looking back now as an adult, because again, people who listen to this kind of music have a developed sense of the world, a developed sense of who they are, and there's a certain spirit that, for instance, other fans of other music, that they lack. And that should serve us well when looking at the world that we find ourselves in now. I mean, what better type of person is there than that? Does that make sense?
100%, man. You know, I've met so many people at shows and, um, in real life, you know what I mean? I feel so fortunate to have been a young person in growing up in the heavy metal scene on the West Coast, it was an instant, sort of brotherhood that we were able to form with people over something like that, and, I have, like, concert friends, like, people I'd never hung out with in real life, but I would meet up with at concerts just because we were all there, because if Morbid Angel's coming to town, the Santa Cruz team's gonna be there, the Sacramento team's gonna be there, the San Francisco dudes are gonna be there and dudettes, like, and you just start meeting all these people, and then social media came along and there were even more ways for those communities to sort of network and know who was going to shows and whatnot. But I mean, dude, it was a golden age before social media and all this, polarization that we're in right now. And as far as, little musical cultural communities, if you will, little I don't think we'll ever really have that again, but it persists. I'll close by saying, one of my favorite Death albums is the Sound of Persistence or Perseverance. Actually, is it Persist? No, I don't know. I'm been on air too long today, dude. But the perseverance of it, metal like it's always going to be there. It doesn't go away. Like whatever the extremity of sonic enjoyment or punishment is, heavy metal is going to be there as long as there is electricity coming out of the walls and bedrooms for heshers and heshettes to bang away on instruments. It's going to be there. It never disappears. It never goes anywhere. It may stale out at some points. It may get thematic or formulamatic at some points, but it is the bleeding tip of innovative aggression in music, and people looked at symphony the same way,
Right.
Spore's dad, when he was a kid, he wasn't allowed to listen to symphony music because it was considered the devil's music because it had that, that those deep tones. He had to listen to
Uh-huh.
marching band music or it was ungodly, so
Right. Right.
we've come a long way, but that scene never goes away. It's it's in tatters right now because of the politics and the corporatism. Like they brought it back and then they suffocated it with politics and corporatism. So
Yeah.
I'm a little depressed with where it's headed right now, but it's always there. There's always a metal underground, and it's cool to see young kids like have their favorite genres be able to innovate with the new paradigm that you're talking about, where they
Yeah.
can consider subgenres and decade periods and then build new bands based on those, like flagrantly, sometimes it's fun, man.
Yeah.
I'll always be a Hesher.
Right on. All right. Well, thank you so much, Hesher. Really appreciate you. I'm gonna give a shout out to Kevin, who dropped a big fat super chat for me over the past week and gave me a couple of movie and book ideas that I'm gonna cover. One of those I'm probably gonna cover is Cormac McCarthy's original screenplay, The Counselor, which is a great movie. It is a movie with Michael Fassbender. It's about the cartels, etc., and Brad Pitt. And it's again a Cormac McCarthy original screenplay. He died this past year. We've covered so much Cormac McCarthy over the past year. We got to get back to that. So I'm probably going to cover that. Thank you so much, Kevin. Shouts out to Jason. Our big fan here in Armada who dropped some $8 for me on PayPal. Thank you so much, Jason. Really appreciate you. Let's see. Shouts out to Buster who drops $10 and says, "Good show. Thank you so much, Buster." Shouts out to Jason who dropped $8 on PayPal. And let me look at super chats real quick before we get out of here. I think we got a couple super chats on YouTube.
Yeah, first person Q, $5.
Yes, shouts out to first person Q who drops $5 and says, "Have you ever seen the Joseph Gordon-Levitt movie Brick? High school noir detective story, great stream, interesting guest." Yes, Hesher is an interesting guest. Our old boy here.
Thanks, dude.
Yes, I have seen Brick. It's been a long time, but it is an original movie because it's a noir detective story. I need to go back and rewatch it. I wasn't a big fan of it when it came out. But maybe I need to go back and check it out because the screenplay is pretty interesting. And again, it's a pretty unpredictable movie. So that's cool. So thank you for that $5 first person cue. Shouts out to Roscoe P. Cotrain who drops 20 Canadian, says interesting convo. Thanks for the stream, BLA. Yes, thank you so much, Roscoe P. Cotrain. Appreciate you there, homeboy. And finally, let me see on Donut Chat. I don't think we got anything on Donut Chat. All right, everybody. So look, please make sure that you go to ACR Alternate Current Radio, you go to TNT Radio, you go to Boiler Room, you go to Hesher Session. I dropped all the links in the video description. They're in the chat description as we were going by. Please check those out. Please check us out on Boiler Room on Thursday nights. Check out Hesher every day on TNT Radio Live, State of the Nation. He is killing it. Big time interviews with big time people who are, you're not going to see, honestly, I'm just going to say this just objectively. You're not going to see or hear anything else anywhere. They're there. They're on TNT, and you're not going to see them or hear them anywhere else, especially the way that they talk. Shouts out to Ruckus. Shouts out to Joseph Arthur and his show and all the guys over there because they're really killing it. And shouts out to Spore also. So thank you so much, Hesher. Really appreciate it. Everybody here loves you. Listen, guys, last thing I'll say is go back to Boiler Room, go to the archives. If you, especially this, okay, if you are like driving somewhere, if you're going on a trip, if you're doing nothing, if you're at work, just go to the archives and listen to some of the Boiler Rooms. They're not dated. They're relevant. Everything that they've talked about for years is happening now or is about to happen, and they don't date. Everything is still relevant. I listened to these guys for years. They deeply influenced the way that I think in my worldview. And I can't tell you how many people there must be like me who are out there listening to in the dark. And you guys, Hesher and these guys, they're talking, but you forget that there are people out there that are really listening and that you're really influencing. So please go back and check those out.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate that. And you're right. It's a topical show. So if you would look at it objectively, you might think, oh, I don't need to hear about topics from, 2 years ago. But when you listen back to it, it's like, it's all projected forward. Like we're trying to figure out why this is happening now and what it leads to. So that's what makes it fun to go back into the archives and explore. And our deepest archives right now are on Spreaker, our Spreaker channel, and on Rockfin for the video versions. And we have a much deeper archive that we're going to have to resurrect. And the reason it's down right now is because we didn't know what the hell we were doing when we got started, and there was copyrighted music all over it. So there's probably Metallica playing on it and all that stuff. So I had to pull all that stuff down when they started getting really strict about that. But we will bring it back, and those archives will be available for everybody. But they go back pretty far right now, so you can have some fun with it. Thanks once again, man. Really enjoyed being here tonight.
Appreciate it. All right. Peace, y'all. Love y'all. Peace.